Hello everyone, hope you're all doing well. Today we want to talk about intrusive thoughts, transient thoughts, OCD and HOCD. And what is the process of how we process it when they pop up? I've included lots of links for you of the specialists, psychologists, psychotherapists, clinical psychologists, researchers, scientists in the description of this video below. So you can get familiarized with the information that you need to know to sort these events for yourself. My research are on different tangents about movement of mind and what's the role of thought and what kinds of thoughts and the relationship between us and thoughts and so on, which I think it would be very helpful for us to examine the components and fragments of our psyche and the role they play in the way we get bamboozled and confused when such thoughts pop up into our heads. So in order to understand this whole thing better and be able to be more knowledgeable, not to be so easily confused about such intrusive thoughts, including thoughts about our sexuality and so on. And therefore, I think it's best if we would focus on it in this tangent that I'm introducing. First of all, I'm going to be talking about one kind of sexuality, so it would be easier for me to deliver rather than trying to include every gender in there as part of the discussion, because it becomes confusing. So I talk about the heterosexuals, and then you see the women, men, any other gender, see how it fits into their story or experience. And perhaps it will be helpful when you focus on the concept rather than which gender this is directed towards. But I direct it toward one gender to make it easier for myself to deliver what I want to say directly to that particular example. So, we know that when a thought appears in our heads, we process it as facts. And why is that? Why are we bamboozled and think that what appears in our head is reliable, it's fact, is thought of accuracy, it's actuality? Okay, so let's talk about that. You see, we got to understand thoughts and thinking and different kinds of thoughts and the relationship of thoughts and us. And before we start that, we got to really understand that thought is the roots of all conflicts. All thoughts are intrusive. The degree of them are different. And that the further the thought goes away from our makeup, it becomes more intrusive. And when it starts suggesting and popping up ideas that it has not even nothing to do with it, it didn't even exist when what it is attacking was created in us, then it becomes really intrusive. And when we understand that thought has no business even hinting to that or discussing that, then we will be free from the confusion that it can bring. So let's put thought in its place. If you understand that we, as a Homo sapiens, we human beings, didn't come about the way we are just 30,000 years ago. It was in the making, a long before that, thousands of years before that. But something interesting happened, that all the troubles and hell broke loose 30,000 years ago. Before 30,000 years ago, we were just like any other animal, living our life peacefully, doing our things, and instinctively living the way we were designed to live. We had to drink water, we would drink. We had to eat, we would eat. We had to hunt, we would hunt. We had to sleep, we would sleep. We had to procreate, have sex, we would have sex. And everything and what we were, what we needed, and our gender was all clearly placed, programmed, and set in stone. And no doubt about anything. We would act as we were created and programmed in our DNA. Everything was clear to us. What our sexuality was, what our needs were, what our activities were, all instinctive. There was no thought involved before 30, 40,000 years ago. So we were just like any other animal. Everything clear, no interference, and no confusions of any kind. Everything based on our needs and based on our biology, how it was designed, put together, and created. So there were no opinions of any sort about it to pop up or come up or suggest or confuse us for us to go data hunting, searching what this meant, what that meant. There was nothing there. Everything was peaceful. Problems started when we became capable of thinking, thought. The latest part of frontal cortex was developed, and then the whole processing and function of the brain changed from the way it was to include intrusive suggestions, analyzations, processing, on all that. Everything became a little bit longer in chain of command and understanding, where before it was all hardwired, now it's Wi-Fi. It has to communicate with different components. But before, it was all hardwired. Very clear. Perhaps the example that we can understand these days a little bit easier. So there was no interference. As you know, in an electrical system, when it's hardwired, there is no interference. If there is, very minimal, nothing noticeable. But when it becomes through frequencies, radio frequencies, or Wi-Fi, then there's always interferences and not complete data being transferred, and breaks down in the links, and things would be misplaced, and when it gets to the other side, it's not exactly as when the message or the data was sent. In the old times, when the analog signals were being sent to digital before the computer era, it was different. The computer would turn the signals into analog to send it through telephone wires, and telephone wires would send it through, and the other end, the computer would change it to digital again in order to be able to understand it. And lots of messy quality of the information would get to the other end. And then always, when the computers were connected to each other, it was very straightforward connections because it was hardwired. Same thing here. Before 30, 40,000 years ago, animals were all hardwired, all instinctive, and everything was clear. Then 30,000 years ago, we became capable of thinking, which then things were a little bit not the same as before. It became like Wi-Fi. So frontal cortex would talk to amygdala. Amygdala would have his own signals to be sent out, and it would go through thalamus perhaps, and then it would send to cortex. And all these times there were possibilities of corruption in the data and the information, malfunctions in the signalings, and sometimes signal would not go through. And this is exactly what happens when OCD takes place. The signals that amygdala is sending to cortex won't get through, or vice versa. And therefore it keeps repeating the same signal. And then we wonder, oh, if it doesn't go away, that question, and if it still remains and lingers, that might mean it's fact. That might mean is describing me, because it doesn't go away. I'm not interested in that suggestion, in that thought, in that whatever it's popped up in my head. But why doesn't it go away? Then it could mean something. No, it doesn't mean anything. It's a malfunction. We're an electrical system. And we don't seem to think that we can malfunction because we believe we are perfect. Especially that many of us have certain kind of beliefs, and we connect ourselves to certain deity or certain supernatural, and we feel we are a wonderful person, so we're a really good person, therefore there can never be anything imperfect within us. So when there is a malfunction, we don't even believe it. We think, no, it's not a malfunction. It's just telling us how we are. To the point that we actually believe when a irrelevant thought pops up in our head about our sexuality. A heterosexual gets confused when an image of a same gender or a thought of sexual involvement or of the same gender shows up in his mind, in his thought. And he thinks, oh, it happened in my brain, I can see it in my brain, then it must be my thought. Lo and behold, it's just a thought. It's not your thought. In fact, it has nothing to do with you. It just happens to be there because you have the ability, given the blessing of being able to think 30,000 years ago. And there are different thinking and different kinds of thoughts, different abilities. Thinking is an ability. It's not a fact. It doesn't describe you. It's like seeing. You see something out there, it doesn't mean that you created it. It just means you have the ability to see things that are out there. And if you don't like it, you turn around, look somewhere else. But when it comes to thought, whatever pops into your head, you think it has factuality. It's truth. It's some heavenly decree. It's a decree. It's none of that. It's just an ability. And your brain is a thought manufacturing plant. It can manufacture thought day in, day out. And most of them, if not pretty much all of them, are irrelevant when it's intrusive and transient thoughts. The thought that you calculate something with, you learn about something, you want to design something, produce something, make your plans come together, that is your thinking coming from your consciousness. But transient thoughts, intrusive thoughts about many different things, if you have a thought of being a pedophile or killing someone or pushing someone over the edge of a cliff or pushing someone from the platform of the train station when the train comes. These thoughts are intrusive thoughts that comes and shows up in every single person's in life that exists on this earth. Different intrusive thoughts could appear and does appear. But the difference is that those people who are not in the glitch of OCD, they simply think about it and think, oh wow, that was weird. And then they go on. But with the people who have OCD and they don't have clear understanding of the relationship between thought and them, they believe thought is actually them. It is a reflection of who they are. These thoughts are presented, which is totally false, irrelevant. So we got to understand the role of thought. Number one rule is to simply understand thought came way after humanity was established. Human being became to be human being. So thought couldn't have anything to do with how you were actually put together biologically, because you were put together biologically way before thought showed up. Before even thought was a capability, human being was in development. And everything about it was working perfectly fine, functioning perfectly fine. His heart, his kidney, his liver, his sexuality, his gender, was all clear and working perfectly. So thought didn't have anything to do with our creation, did it? No, as we all know. When your mom and dad decided to have a romantic moment, or some cases more than a moment, so they had their interaction, and one of the sperms out of 300 million or so is successful to travel into the ovum, ovaries, and spark, electrical spark will happen, which is the beginning of shaping of heart, beginning of creation of heart. Tell me, was there any thought involved in that heart being created? No. The heart hasn't even been created. And for the rest of the body, there needs to be a heart to begin with. And so, if nothing else has been created, and heart is the first one, obviously there was no thought involved in this spark from you. But so then the heart takes shape. Then other organs. I don't know what comes next, but let's say kidney, liver, other organs take place, and your genitalia, your sexuality, your gender, all takes place and programmed what it is going to be, how it is going to be, your DNA is formed, and so on. All through these productions of liver and kidney and sexuality and everything else, there's still no thought, because you're still in the womb. You're being created. You're not completed. There is no thought, but everything else is being created. Thought has nothing to do with the creation of everything else that is being created at that time, right? And then you are eventually born. There's still no thought. You don't have the ability of thinking. You can recognize things, maybe feel something, warmth and all that, but you don't have a processing of thinking, thoughts. And then you become about, 1 year old. That's about the time that you start learning all through this time. Instincts, hungry, and you cry and this and that, and feel things and beginning to learn. But all along you have everything else working. Heart, kidney, everything else is in their place, and all the programming that needs to make everything function is already decided in the womb before thought even have a chance to be created yet. So about 1 year old or whatnot, you're still learning and so on, until a few years later that you start learning certain kind of thinking, and then if their parents want to really get you ahead of time, they start teaching you math and so on and so forth, and you learn this process of thinking. So where was thought when you were given your gender? Where was thought when your sexuality was being created? Where your DNA and the programming of all what you're going to be was being created? It was all created inside the womb. And you were born then. And then you begin to learn about thought or its effects or process and all that. So thought was not even in the picture when you were being given your sexuality, your gender, your programming, your DNA and all that. So if thought wasn't involved in giving you all that, how could a thought be able to take any of that was given to you, created in your biology, away from you. If it wasn't given to you by thought, your gender, sexuality, programming, and all that, it can be taken away from you by thought. Can you take away your heart by thought? Can you take away your kidney by thought? Then how come you think your thought can take away your sexuality or gender or make you become something else? If you're heterosexual, the thought of being gay or homosexual shows up and you believe it. How could that be? If you understand that thought had nothing to do with you becoming and being the gender that you are, then it can have nothing to do with having any ability to take it away, regardless of how many million times these images or suggestions or thoughts pop up to your head. It has no power. So you gotta understand that thoughts can appear but have no power to change you in any shape or form. It's a suggestion. The problem is that you don't understand that you're the boss. You are the one who is supposed to judge these things. Just like eyesight, you have the ability to see things, but you're the one who judges which thing to continue seeing, which thing to turn around, you're not interested. What you see doesn't describe you. What you see, it's out there. And you just recognize, have the ability to recognize it and take notice of it. And you judge which you want to continue watching or which you don't want to, based on your interest and so on. Now, but you don't do that when the thought shows up. You don't judge, you just think, oh, thought shows up, I have to comply, I have to take it as fact, take it as truth, take it as a decree, a judgment, deities appoint. Why? Because we don't understand our psyche. We don't understand how thought is made and what kinds of thoughts are there. We don't understand that we are thought-making machine, but what we make is not us, it's a product. It's like saying a factory that produces a certain product, each one of those products are the factory. No, this factory makes products, all kinds of products. But none of them is actually representing the factory. The factory is the factory, has the capability of making products. And those products are not describing the factory. The factory is got different capabilities. One of these capabilities is to make products. Same thing with you. You have the ability to make thoughts. And some of these thoughts are your thoughts because you're calculating something, you're designing something, you're making plans to accomplish something that you want to accomplish in life, you want to learn something, and you want to solve a problem. That's your thought. But then there are other kind of thoughts. Intrusive thoughts, transient thoughts, pop-up thoughts. These are thoughts that exist just like anything else out there exists that you have the ability to see. And because everything else in the world it exists and it's common knowledge, it has come to you as knowledge through media, through movies, through radio, through reading, through history, through hearing it from here to see other people. All these information out there is known to you, and if it's known to you, thought can be made out of it because you have the apparatus that can make thoughts. So whatever is out there that is known to human being in the universe, a thought can be created out of it. But just because that is an ability that this factory can do, that does not mean that that thought that has been created is you. How come when a thought creates something like, I don't know, an aircraft that has never been created, or some kind of a ship, spaceship, you don't think that is your capability, you just understand it's a thought. But when it comes to your gender, suddenly say, oh, it must mean that I'm going to be something else that I am, other than what I am. Well, naturally, it is we are so sensitive about our sexuality that we identify ourselves with our sexuality, that we are so protective of it, and that's why a negative thought, intrusive thought, always attacks what you are not. In other words, always attacks what you are by what you are not. You never see that a thought pops up about what you are, because you already know. But you get anxious and nervous when a thought pops up about something that you're not. You get focused on it, and then you go data hunting. Why is it there? What does it mean? Is it possible that I'm not what I am? All those questions, because you're always so, it is so important to you that you always want to protect it, and you love what you are, you enjoy what you are, you're happy what you are, and you don't want anything to attack it. And when an attack comes, you take it seriously, because you're designed to take these things seriously, to protect yourself. Your brain is designed for that. When it does try to protect, that means you focus on it instead of simply saying, that's not it, I'm not interested, which you automatically say it, but the malfunction of the signaling system doesn't let these thoughts to stop. It keeps going. Like I explained in one of the other videos, that a friend of you asks, do you want tea or coffee? You said, no, thank you. They ask you, do you want tea or coffee? You said, no, thank you. Then he asked, do you want tea or coffee? You say, no, thank you. Then he asked, do you want tea or coffee? You say, no, thank you. Then he asked, do you want tea or coffee? You say, well, maybe I should want to have a tea or coffee, if you're weak-minded. But you don't realize that the reason that this friend was repeating, because he's deaf. He cannot hear your answer. That's why he's repeating it. It doesn't mean anything else. Doesn't mean you should have tea or coffee. It just means he didn't get the answer because he's incapable of. That's what happens between amygdala and cortex. It doesn't get the signal, so it keeps coming. The same image, same pop-up, same suggestion. And by simply learning that this is a malfunction, you become insensitive to it, you stop protecting it, you understand that it cannot do anything to you, it's a thought, has no power. It simply needs to go away by itself by you simply focusing on your whatever it is you're doing during the day, the moment of life, the present moment, actuality of life, your efforts, be involved in that, and recognize that the thoughts show up, but don't give them attention and focus on what you're doing. And eventually it learns that there is no interest here. And then it's like manually you have delivered the answer to the question or to the pop-up suggestion. And eventually the brain realizes, oh, there is no interest in involving in that kind of a topic. It shuts down. So, let me stop here, take a break, then I want to discuss with you and continue this discussion right after. I'll talk to you soon.